Hello, everyone, and welcome to Mountain Lake Journal. I'm Tom Halleck. This week, New York Governor Kathy Hochul releases her $233 billion executive budget that the governor says holds the line on spending and taxes, but also calls for another $2.5 billion to help care for the thousands of migrants arriving every month to New York City, a crisis that, as of right now, has no end in sight.
This will be a $233 billion budget, accomplished without raising income taxes.
Governor Kathy Hochul says her 2025 state budget will spend about 4.5% more than last year's budget, but at the same time cut back on the size of what have been historic increases in state spending the past couple of years after COVID.
This budget proves that you can have fiscal discipline and that can coexist with people-driven progressive policies.
For the second year, Hochul is proposing another $2.5 billion to help house and feed the tens of thousands of migrants arriving every month in New York City.
New York continues to carry the burden of sheltering more than 69,000 migrants. Since day one, I have said that this is ultimately the responsibility of the federal government to address this crisis. Congress, the House of Representatives in particular, and the White House must remain at the negotiating table until they restore the rule of law on our border, fix our asylum system, and provide relief to states like New York, who've been shouldering this burden for far too long.
The governor says she's planning another trip to Washington this week to lobby for more federal aid and for immigration reform. But for now, the governor wants to tap into the state's reserves to help cover the cost.
I am proposing that we draw $500 million from state reserves that are intended for one-time emergencies like this. This will help manage the migrant crisis for a total of $2.4 billion.
The governor's budget covers the cost of the proposal she laid out in her State of the State for her scaled-back housing plan, more than $1 billion in incentives to get developers to build affordable housing, convert now empty office buildings after COVID-19, and build up to 15,000 new homes on state-owned sites and former prisons.
Even with these historic investments, our state still needs hundreds and hundreds of thousands of new homes to solve our housing crisis. The answer, my friends, is not blowing in the wind, it's shovels in the ground. And I know we can do this.
$40 million would go to combat retail theft, another $40 million to crack down on domestic violence, $45 million to expand school-based mental health clinics. And while the increase in school aid will be less than the past 2 years, Hochul says overall it's still 33% more than it was in 2021, a record $35 billion.
This is the highest level of education funding in state history at $35 billion, a 20% increase since I was sworn into office.
Spending that the governor didn't mention in her address, another $82 million for ORTA to invest in recreation and former Olympic venues in Lake Placid, and another $400 million for the Environmental Protection Fund, which were both applauded by lawmakers from the North Country, including Republican Matt Simpson, who represents Essex and Warren counties.
I think the EPF being funded, the Environmental Protection Fund being funded at $400 million again, that's very critical to the North Country and protecting our resources, our natural resources, and protecting against, any of the effects of the change in our weather patterns that we've seen over the years. She mentioned the $4.2 billion bond act that was approved by the voters last year. That's going to create the opportunity to build resiliency within all of our communities and help protect against future losses from some of these storm events that we've been seeing recently. But overall, the thing that was lacking is any real attempt to lower the cost of living or lower the tax burden and actually create a level playing field. The governor mentioned it, but I don't see that yet anywhere in the budget where we're really concentrating on becoming competitive with other states.
In a statement, State Senator Dan Steck said he is also pleased with the new round of ORTA funding, but at the same time criticizes the growth of the state budget and increase in spending, especially for the migrant crisis. And while he says he's encouraged by the proposal to use state-owned lands and facilities, such as closed prisons, as part of her affordable housing strategy, Steck says the proposal also would let the governor close as many as 5 prisons, which he says could have a devastating effect on the North Country. Steck says he won't support any budget that closes correctional facilities. Assemblyman Billy Jones agrees.
The budget language reads up to 5 correctional facilities. That's what it says in the language and in the budget bill that she proposed. It gets folded in the budget like has been done in the past. The previous governor had put this provision in as well. We don't know of any yet. I imagine the process will play out like it has in the past. It will, the budget language is included. If it gets passed in the budget, then she has 90 days, I believe, to announce what closures will occur or who those facilities are, I should say, and then they will be closed in the process after that. I have 6 of them in my district, and we certainly look forward. We look at how this is going to affect the men and women that work there, civilians and correction officers, and how that affects them. Certainly, I'm going to oppose this, and I will not vote to close correctional facilities, just because I don't think this is the right thing that we should be doing. We should be concentrating on putting more safety standards in those correctional facilities for the men and women that work in there, and we should be concentrating on that. When we're talking about right sizing, the governor said in her language, right sizing these facilities, we should be talking about doing the right thing and making sure these facilities are safer. The HALT Act that was put in a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, has done nothing but made our prison system even more dangerous. So we need to look at correcting some of those issues.
Chamber of Commerce President Gary Douglas also applauded the budget, including $82 million in new capital investments for ORTA and another $100 million in funding for the Red Sea Downtown Revitalization Initiative, which has pumped millions of dollars into communities including Plattsburgh, Saranac Lake, and Lake George. Douglas also noted the full continued commitment to the multi-year capital plan for the Metropolitan Transportation Authority, that he says will mean more contracts for the dozens of transportation manufacturers here in the North Country. And while the governor's budget does include more money for SUNY and CUNY campuses across the state, it won't do much to help several colleges across New York that are facing financial stress, including Clinton Community College, which, like so many others, has seen a dramatic drop in enrollment over the past decade and after COVID, so much so that the college's Board of Trustees has approved a plan to leave its historic campus on Bluff Point in Plattsburgh and to move a few miles across town to share space with SUNY Plattsburgh, beginning in the fall of 2025.